Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard. Over the past several episodes, we have explored character, purpose, coaching, success, and leadership. Each of these topics matters because they influence the way we live, compete, teach, lead, and serve others. Yet today, I want to discuss something even more personal. I want to discuss a conversation that takes place every single day of our lives, often without us realizing its influence. It's a conversation that no coach can fully hear, no teacher can fully hear, no parent can fully hear, no teammate can fully hear. And yet, it may be the most important conversation we ever have. It is the conversation we have with ourselves. The longer I spend around athletes, coaches, educators, and leaders, the more convinced I become that many of life's greatest battles are not fought in public. They are fought privately. They occur in the space between what happens to us and how we interpret what happens to us. Two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different conclusions. One person sees an obstacle and views it as evidence they should quit. Another sees the same obstacle and views it as an opportunity to grow. The event may be identical, the interpretation is different though, and the interpretation often becomes the story we tell ourselves. Sport provides a fascinating environment for observing this reality because competition has a way of exposing what already exists beneath the surface. A missed shot is never just a missed shot. A turnover is never just a turnover. A poor performance is never just a poor performance. What often follows these moments is an internal conversation that nobody else can hear. An athlete misses a game winning shot and immediately begins replaying the moment in their mind. A coach loses an important game and spends hours analyzing every decision that was made. A student receives disappointing results on an exam and begins questioning their abilities. A parent makes a mistake and starts wondering whether they are good enough. A leader faces criticism and begins doubting their judgment. The visible event may last only a few seconds. The internal conversation can continue for days, weeks, or even years. One of the most interesting questions we can ask is where this internal voice comes from. Human beings are not born believing they are failures. Children do not enter the world convinced that they are inadequate or incapable. Those beliefs develop over time. They are shaped by experiences, relationships, disappointments, successes, failures, criticism, encouragement, and countless other influences. Sometimes a single comment stays with a person for years. Sometimes a difficult experience becomes part of a larger story. Sometimes repeated comparison creates beliefs that slowly become accepted as truth. Over time, these experiences contribute to an internal narrative that influences how people see themselves and their place in the world. The challenge is that many of us never stop to examine that narrative. We simply assume it is accurate. We assume that because a thought appears in our mind, it must be true. But thoughts are not always truth. They are interpretations, and interpretations can be wrong. Imagine an athlete who has one poor game. The athlete begins thinking, I always struggle when the pressure is high. Another athlete experiences the exact same situation but thinks, I need to learn how to handle pressure better. But both athletes made mistakes. Both athletes faced disappointment. Yet one interprets the experience as evidence of personal inadequacy, while the other interprets it's an opportunity for growth. The difference is not talent, the difference is perspective. This matters because the stories we repeatedly tell ourselves eventually shape our beliefs. Those beliefs influence our actions, and our actions influence our habits, and our habits influence the direction of our lives. In many ways, our internal conversations become self fulfilling prophecies. Athletes who consistently tell themselves they cannot perform under pressure often begin performing exactly as they expect. Leaders who convince themselves that they are incapable of making difficult decisions often become hesitant when difficult decisions are required. Students who repeatedly tell themselves they are not intelligent often stop taking the very risks that could help them grow. What begins as a thought gradually becomes a lens through which we interpret reality. One of the most revealing questions we can ask ourselves is this: would I speak to a friend the way I speak to myself? Think about that for a moment. Most people would never speak to a teammate, colleague, student, child, or friend in the same way they sometimes speak to themselves. We are often willing to extend patience, grace, understanding, and encouragement to others while denying those same qualities to ourselves. A teammate misses a shot, we encourage them. A friend experiences failure, we support them. A colleague makes a mistake, we remind them that mistakes are part of growth. Yet, when we fail, we often become our own harshest critic. But why? Perhaps because we have confused performance with identity. This may be one of the most common traps in sport and in life. Athletes are consistently evaluated. Statistics are recorded, rankings are published, successes are celebrated, failures are analyzed. Over time, it becomes tempting to believe that performance determines value. When performance is good, confidence rises. When performance is poor, confidence falls. The problem is that confidence built entirely upon performance is incredibly fragile. If your value depends upon winning, what happens when you lose? If your identity depends on achievement, what happens when you fail? If your self worth depends upon recognition, what happens when nobody notices? These are not merely athletic questions, they are human questions. Many people spend years building their identity on foundations that cannot support the weight being placed upon them. Some build their identity around careers. Others build it around achievements, titles, accomplishments, relationships, or public recognition. None of these things are inherently wrong. The problem arises when they become the primary source of our value, because all of these things can change. Jobs can end, athletic careers end, seasons end, positions changes, recognition fades, life moves forward. If identity is attached entirely to temporary things, then stability becomes difficult to maintain. This is one of the reasons comparison can be so distractive. Modern culture encourages constant comparison. Social media provides endless opportunities to evaluate ourselves against others. Athletes compare statistics, students compare grades, professionals compare careers, families compare lifestyles. Yet comparison rarely produces satisfaction. There will always be someone who appears more successful, someone who appears more talented, someone who appears more accomplished. If our value depends upon being superior to others, then peace becomes almost impossible to find. Comparison creates a game that nobody truly wins. The irony is that many people spend so much time comparing themselves to others that they never fully become themselves. Instead of developing their own gifts, they become distracted by someone else's journey. Instead of pursuing their own purpose, they become consumed with someone else's success. The internal voice becomes focused on what is missing rather than what is possible. This is where gratitude becomes powerful. Gratitude shifts attention. It reminds us that life is not simply about what we have not achieved. It encourages us to recognize what has already been given. Gratitude doesn't ignore challenges, but it prevents challenges from becoming the entire story. Faith has profoundly shaped my understanding of these ideas. One of the most important questions faith asks is it's not what have you achieved, but rather who are you becoming? This question changes everything because it shifts attention away from performance and toward transformation. It reminds us that human value doesn't fluctuate every time we succeed or fail. It reminds us that mistakes do not define identity. It reminds us that growth remains possible regardless of current circumstances. Sport often asks what we accomplished. Faith often asks what we learned. Sport often measures outcomes. Faith often examines character. Sport often celebrates performance. Faith often emphasizes purpose. These perspectives do not compete with one another. They simply remind us that performance is not the entire story. There's a deeper story taking place, the story of who we are becoming. As I have grown older, I have become increasingly convinced that the most important leadership journey, coaching journey, education journey, and spiritual journey begins internally. Before we lead others, we must learn to lead ourselves. Before we influence others, we must understand the stories influencing us. That's why the voice nobody else hears matters so much. It is shaping how we respond to adversity. It is shaping how we view ourselves. It is shaping how we approach relationships. It is shaping how we experience success and failure. Whether we realize it or not, it is helping write the story of our lives. As we close today's episode, I want to leave you with a simple but very important question. Who taught you how to speak to yourself? Take time to reflect on that question because the answer may reveal more about your confidence, your fears, your leadership, your faith, and your future than you realize. Because one day the crowd will disappear. One day the season will end. One day the applause will fade. And one day the criticism will fade as well. And when all of those voices become silent, one voice will remain, your own. The question is not whether that voice exists. The question is whether it is telling you the truth. Thank you for joining me for episode 6 of Beyond the Scoreboard. Until next time, continue pursuing excellence, continue investing in people, and remember that some of life's most important lessons are found beyond the scoreboard.